It started with the sound of fists against metal, a dull, desperate thudding in the night. By the time the neighbors called 911, the man behind those cries was already dying. His name was Antoine Jones, a 27-year-old from Montgomery County, Maryland. And his death, in the early hours of November 17, 2012, would expose a dark and dangerous truth about police misconduct that stretched far beyond one tragic night. Antoine wasn't a criminal. He was a son, a brother, and a father of 2 young kids. He grew up in Tacoma Park, a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Washington, D.C., known more for its coffee shops and calm streets than for violent confrontations. Friends remembered him as soft-spoken, someone who worked odd jobs and dreamed of saving enough money to open a small auto repair shop. He had made mistakes, minor ones, but he was trying to build something better. That night, though, all that would end in a dimly lit parking lot. It began with a call about a disturbance. Someone had reported a man acting erratically near a convenience store. According to dispatch, the man was unarmed, pacing, and seemed disoriented. 2 officers from the Montgomery County Police Department, Officer Brandon Wells and Officer Christopher O. Connor, responded. Both were veterans, known for being assertive on patrol, and both had multiple prior complaints for excessive force that never led to disciplinary action. When they arrived, Antoine was sitting on the curb, hands clasped around his knees. He wasn't aggressive. Witnesses later said he looked more confused than dangerous. A clerk who watched from the window told investigators, "He looked like he was talking to himself. He wasn't hurting anyone." But Wells didn't see a man in distress. He saw a threat. The officers ordered Antoine to stand up and place his hands on his head. He hesitated. The confusion in his eyes seemed to frustrate Wells. Within seconds, Wells grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. Antoine winced, saying, Wait, I didn't do nothing." O'Connor stepped in, shouting, "Stop resisting," even as Antoine's only movement was trying to regain balance. Then came the first hit, a knee to the ribs, followed by a shove that sent him sprawling to the ground. The witnesses heard the sound of something heavy hitting the pavement again and again. Antoine's voice broke into screams. "Please, I can't breathe," he cried out. Those were the same words America would hear again and again in the years to come, a grim echo that still haunts. When backup arrived, Antoine was motionless, his face pressed into the gravel, blood pooling beneath his cheek. Paramedics were called, but by the time they arrived, his pulse was faint. He was rushed to Suburban Hospital, where he was pronounced dead less than an hour later. The official report described it as a medical emergency during a police encounter. The autopsy told a different story. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as asphyxia due to restraint. Antoine had bruises across his chest, neck, and back. His ribs were fractured. He had a deep cut on his temple consistent with blunt force trauma. The report also noted petechial hemorrhaging, a telltale sign of suffocation. In simple terms, he was choked to death. But the story didn't end there. What followed was a campaign to bury the truth. Within hours, the department issued a statement calling Antoine Jones an aggressive suspect who became combative. They said officers used necessary force to subdue him. That line would appear in every local news report over the next few days. Yet no one mentioned that the convenience store's security camera had captured the entire incident. When reporters asked to see the footage, police said it was under review. For weeks, they claimed it was being processed as evidence. Later, it was revealed the tape had gone missing. Antoine's mother, Patricia Jones, refused to stay silent. She had raised Antoine alone, working double shifts as a nurse to keep her family afloat. When she saw her son's body at the morgue, bruised, swollen, unrecognizable, she made a promise. They're not going to hide this. She hired a civil rights attorney named Marcus Ellison, who had handled several high-profile police misconduct cases. Together, they began digging. Ellison filed a lawsuit against the Montgomery County Police Department, accusing them of wrongful death, falsified reports, and evidence tampering. His first discovery came through a whistleblower, a young officer who anonymously sent him an internal memo. The document mentioned that Wells and O'Connor had both failed to activate their body cameras during the arrest. The reason? They claimed equipment malfunction. But internal logs showed the cameras had been manually turned off minutes before they made contact with Antoine. That was the first crack in their story. Then came the second. A local journalist named Dana Stevens, working for the Bethesda Chronicle, managed to obtain audio from the dispatcher that night. It revealed something chilling. Just before the arrest, Wells radioed in saying, "Subject refusing commands, going hands-on." But at that point, Antoine hadn't even been touched. The timeline didn't add up. Wells had decided to use force before there was any actual resistance. As public pressure grew, the state attorney's office announced an internal review. But behind the scenes, the department circled the wagons. Reports were rewritten, statements revised. One officer suddenly changed his story, claiming Antoine had tried to grab his belt. Yet, forensic analysis found no fingerprints on any of the equipment, no DNA, no smudges, nothing. Then, a miracle. Someone leaked the missing surveillance footage. It landed in the inbox of journalist Dana Stevens at 2:43 a.m. The anonymous email read, "The truth is in the video. Don't let them bury it." The file showed the entire confrontation in raw, silent black and white. Antoine sitting quietly. Wells approaching fast, shouting something. Then a sudden tackle. 3 officers piling on top of him, one pressing his knee on Antoine's neck for nearly 2 minutes. His body went limp long before they stopped. When the footage aired, the city exploded. Protests filled the streets of Silver Spring and Rockville. Signs read, "Justice for Antoine" and "Turn the cameras back on." The mayor called for an independent investigation, while the police union doubled down, saying the video was taken out of context. Under mounting scrutiny, both Wells and O'Connor were placed on administrative leave. But Patricia Jones wasn't satisfied. "Leave isn't justice," she told reporters. "My son's not coming back. Someone needs to be held accountable." That accountability came slowly, almost reluctantly. In 2014, the U.S. Department of Justice opened a federal civil rights investigation. Their findings were damning. They discovered multiple prior complaints against Wells involving use of excessive force during arrests, all dismissed without consequence. One internal affairs officer even admitted that many cases involving Wells were mishandled due to missing reports. The DOJ's conclusion was blunt. The conduct of the officers in the arrest of Antoine Jones was unconstitutional. Still, bringing charges wasn't simple. Wells claimed he feared for his life. O'Connor backed him, saying Antoine had lunged forward, but the video showed no lunge, no attack, only a man struggling to breathe under the weight of 2 officers. The trial began in 2016. The courtroom was packed. Patricia Jones sat in the front row every day, her son's photo clutched in her hands. Prosecutors presented the footage frame by frame. The defense argued it didn't capture everything. At one point, Wells looked directly at the jury and said, "It was either him or me." That line hung heavy in the air. When the verdict came, it split the city. Wells was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 8 years in prison. O'Connor was acquitted. For Patricia, it was a half-victory. "He should have had life," she said quietly outside the courthouse. But at least someone finally said what happened was wrong. In the years that followed, the Antoine Jones case became a turning point in Maryland's law enforcement policies. It sparked new regulations requiring all officers to keep their body cameras active during public interactions, with automatic penalties for deactivation. The state also established an independent unit to review police-involved deaths. But for the Jones family, the pain never faded. Patricia often visited her son's grave on Sundays, placing small toy cars beside his headstone, a nod to his dream of owning a repair shop. "He was gentle," she once told a reporter. "He just needed help, not handcuffs. What made the case linger in the nation as conscience wasn't just the brutality of the act, but the slow, deliberate effort to erase it. The missing footage, the rewritten reports, the silence from those sworn to protect. It revealed how fragile truth can become when those in power control the story. And in that silence, Antoine's last words, "I can't breathe," became more than a cry for help. They became a haunting reminder of how justice often arrives too late, if it arrives at all. In the end, his story wasn't just about one man's death. It was about a system that allowed it to happen, then tried to pretend it didn't. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.